The calendar year for the UFC in 2023 is over, and they delivered 14 monumental and legendary pay-per-views throughout the year. We saw the UFC expand on their old horizons and give us pay-per-views around the world, in their pay-per-view returns to Brazil, England, Australia and even Canada. The year has been dubbed the year of the upsets and the underdogs, with so many new champions being crowned and titles changing hands. With such a great year for the promotion, it's only right we recap and rank the best of the best. This is the Fight franchise, and every UFC pay-per-view of 2023 ranked from worst to best. Number 14, UFC 289. The unfortunate spot for the worst pay-per-view of the year goes to UFC 289, which was the UFC's return to Canada. Honestly, this pay-per-view is only remembered for one or two moments. The prelims were pretty awful, with the only notable moments being Ayman Zahabi securing a great KO and Steve Erceg having a great debut on short notice. The prelims were very decision heavy, and even the featured bout of Nasruddin Imavov and Chris Curtis was anticlimactic due to a head clash. The main card had some decent fights with Marc-Andre Barriault and Eric Anders and Nate Landwehr versus Dan Ige. Canadian Mike Maylott did try and give the fans something to cheer about with his submission win, but it was Charles Oliveira's KO over Beneil Dariush which lit up the Rogers Arena that night. Amanda Nunes pitched out a shutout versus Irina Aldana and subsequently retired. Nunes' retirement was a cool moment, but nothing special due to the fight before it being so one-sided. Honestly, the only replay factor you'll see from this card is Charles Oliveira's KO of Beneil Dariush and his awesome post-fight speech. No need to ever go back and watch this card. Number 13, UFC 294. The UFC's annual return to Abu Dhabi is up next, and unfortunately this year ranks as one of the worst pay-per-views of the year. This was a card when it originally started, had a hyped co-main event with Khamzat Chimaev taking on Paulo Costa and the rematch of Islam Makhachev versus Charles Oliveira. Costa and Oliveira had to pull out due to injuries, with short notice fights made with a lot of hype, with Kamaru Usman now facing Chimaev on short notice and Alex Volkanovski rematching Islam for the second time this year, which had fans buzzing for these fights. This card, however, really underdelivered, with the prelims being very decision heavy and having an accidental groin kick which ended a fight early. The only notable moments were Mike Breeden beating Anshul Jubli and Muhammad Makayev's comeback win. The main card was good, with two finishes from Ikram Aliskerov and Saeed Nurmagomedov, but Johnny Walker and Magomed Ankalaev ended due to an illegal knee. Khamzat Chimaev and Usman had a competitive fight which was quite lackluster, with fans debating the decision. The main event, however, delivered one of the moments of the year, with a brilliant head kick TKO from Islam Makhachev over Alex Volkanovski. Had the main event not had such a legendary and iconic finish, this pay-per-view may have ranked dead last, but for the monumental end it earns one spot higher than the last place. Number 12, UFC 288. UFC 288 was the UFC's return to New Jersey and was headlined by a bantamweight title bout between at the time defending champion Aljamain Sterling taking on the returning Henry Cejudo. This pay-per-view was nothing special and had no real standout moments. Just as an entire card, it was better than the last two entries. The early prelims was pure action, with KO finishes throughout, with the best coming from Ikram Aliskerov scoring an amazing KO versus Phil Hawes. The prelims had some decent action as well, with Kennedy Nzechukwu and Devin Clark having a fun back and forth, and Matt Frevola and Drew Dober giving us a good scrap, where Frevola cracked that iconic chin of Dober. Kron Gracie stunk up the main card with an awful performance, but short notice Diego Lopez put on an amazing show versus Movsar Evloev, and Yan Xiaonan scored a great KO versus Jessica Andrade. The co-main event was a short notice bout between Gilbert Burns and Bilal Muhammad, where Bilal won a comfortable decision over Burns, who got injured during the fight. The main event was a close and technical back and forth between Sterling and Cejudo, where Sterling got the nod on the judges' scorecards. No amazing standout moments with this card, but was just overall a consistently better card than the last two. Number 11, UFC 286. Finally, after all these years, the UFC brought a pay-per-view back to England after two amazing fight nights the year prior. Many of us were hyped for this card after the amazing atmosphere the O2 had with the last two events, and finally a champion representing England was headlining. Leon Edwards had a trilogy bout with Kamaru Usman after his legendary head kick win. The third bout had a fun and a little bit of a heated build-up, but Leon put on a great performance against one of the best welterweights of all time in a really competitive fight. The co-main event was a 3-round war on the feet between Justin Gaethje and Rafael Fiziev, which was the fight of the night and in some people's eyes one of the best fights of the year. The card also had some great fights and standout moments, with Gunnar Nelson securing an amazing win and a fun scrap between Marvin Vettori and Roman Dolidze. Jack Shore and Muhammad Makayev secured some great submission wins, and Christian Leroy Duncan and Jake Hadley secured stoppages, but the most vicious KO was from Yanal Ashmuz, KOing Sam Patterson and bouncing his head off the canvas with ground and pound. A decent card which needed more star power, which was also let down by quite a lackluster crowd. Number 10, UFC 292. Some pay-per-views are remembered simply for moments and the stars they make. This is the exact case for UFC 292, as it birthed a new era in the bantamweight division and created a brand new superstar. UFC 292 was headlined by a bout between Sean O'Malley and Aljamain Sterling, where this was O'Malley's chance to prove if he was all hype or he had what it took to become champion. O'Malley showed the world what he was made of, securing the KO in the second round, which yes, can be protested was an early stoppage, but when he secured it with the help of that picture-perfect punch, it was all over social media and was a huge talking point during that month and is considered one of the moments of the year. The main card had a brilliant performance by Weili Zhang and Ian Gary, pitching out dominant performances. Brad Tavares destroyed the returning Chris Weidman with leg kicks, and Cheeto put on a decent performance against Pedro Munoz. The tough finales had its moments, with Brad Katona and Cody Gibson going to war and Kurt Hollibau securing the submission win. Gregory Rodriguez secured a vicious finish with elbows. This pay-per-view, when I graded it originally, I gave it more praise than it deserved. Honestly, it was very lackluster upon reflection and will only be remembered for the crowning of Sugar Sean. Number 9, UFC 296. The last pay-per-view and one of the most stacked and heated pay-per-views of the year, this pay-per-view was full of big names, from former title contenders and to even former champion on the prelims, to legends and future superstars and maybe a future champion on the main card. This card was headlined by the much anticipated return of Colby Covington fighting for the welterweight gold versus Leon Edwards. This pay-per-view started with some amazing early prelims, with 3 finishes to start the night of fights. This was followed by 2 more finishes, which included a brilliant KO for Cody Garbrandt. Then came the fight of the night, where Irina Aldana and Cara Rosa went to war, which ended up being the fight of the night and in contention for one of the top 10 fights of the year. This was followed by another fun fight between Dustin Jacoby and Alonzo Menafield. The main card is what brings the score of this pay-per-view down. It started with one of the KOs of the year from Josh Emmett, then Paddy Pimblett pieced up an over-the-hill Tony Ferguson, which was followed by Shavkat Rakhmonov putting on a lackluster performance against Wonderboy, but he did get the finish. Alexandra Pantoja put on a dominant display against Brandon Royval, and Colby Covington put on the worst performance of the year, in a bit of a snooze fest. This pay-per-view with the prelims was tracking as one of the best of the year. It was just a shame it was let down by the main card. Number 8, UFC 293. There was quite a few upsets in the calendar year for the UFC, but 293 put one of the best shockers of the year. The UFC would make 2 trips to Australia, and UFC 293 was the second of their trips to Australia. This card featured some fun bouts, which included the short notice put together bout of Sean Strickland taking on middleweight champion Israel Adesanya. This was heated going into it, with Strickland turning up the heat in the build-up surrounding Izzy and his dog. This led to a fun press conference and build-up, which led into a fight which caused one of the biggest upsets of the year, with Sean Strickland putting on a striking clinic against Izzy, where he won the unanimous decision in Australia and became the unlikely middleweight champion. This was alongside a card with some brilliant finishes and fights, which included Justin Taffa and Tyson Pedro putting on some great finishes, and also a submission win for Alexander Volkov over Tai Tuivasa. The main card also had a fun bout between Manel Cap and Felipe dos Santos. The prelim had some submission wins, but featured an unfortunate arm injury to Jack Jenkins. This card will be remembered for a few reasons, with the F-bomb being dropped twice and some fun finishes, and the main event giving us one of the moments of the year, with Sean Strickland becoming champion. Number 7, UFC 287. The UFC's long-awaited return to Miami came with a fun card, which was headlined by one of the best rivalries in combat sports history. UFC 287 was headlined by the rivalry of Israel Adesanya and Alex Pereira. After Alex managed to dethrone Izzy last year at MSG, this was alongside a card which featured Miami's own Jorge Masvidal in the co-main event. The prelims weren't the best and had some decent fights and moments, with finishes from Joe Pyfer and Steve Garcia, but Kelvin Gastelum put on a fun fight against Chris Curtis, where Gastelum got his first win in just over 2 years. The main card saw Christian Rodriguez end the hype train of Raul Rosas Jr., giving him his first loss. This was followed by a brilliant win by Kevin Holland. Rob Font stopped the hype train, which was Adrian Yanez, with an amazing KO finish. But unfortunately, the co-main event was quite lackluster, with Gilbert Burns dominating Masvidal, who would retire after the fight. The main event was a tense fight between Israel Adesanya and Alex Pereira, which picked up from their previous bout, where after a back and forth first round, late in the second round with Pereira pushing forward, Izzy landed a vicious KO out of nowhere to put Alex out cold, where he gave one of the best celebrations of the year. This was an unreal moment to end the card and finish the pay-per-view on a monumental high. For that and so many fun fights and moments, places this card in a decent spot. Number 6, UFC 283. The first pay-per-view of the year and the UFC's long-awaited return to Brazil. The end of 2022 saw the UFC fail to crown a new light heavyweight champion, which led the UFC to book in Brazil Glover Teixeira and Jamal Hill for vacant gold. This was on top of a super fun card full of amazing talent. The prelims was some of the best of the year, with some amazing finishes and moments, with both the Bonfim brothers bursting onto the scene getting stoppages, including Ishmael, who got the unreal flying knee finish. This was alongside Jailton Almeida keeping his streak going with a finish, and even a brutal finish from Bruno Ferreira over Gregory Rodriguez. Ihor Pretoria finished Shogun in an unfortunate bout where Shogun would hang up the gloves after. The main card saw Johnny Walker batter and finish Paul Craig. Jessica Andrade dominated Lauren Murphy. Gilbert Burns put on an epic display beating Neil Magny. The co-main event was a fun scrap in the quadrilogy of Davidson Figueiredo and Brandon Moreno, which had an unfortunate doctor stoppage end due to how bad Davidson's eye got. Jamal Hill and Glover Teixeira went to war, where Hill battered the much older Teixeira and would win the vacant title to be crowned the new light heavyweight champion. Glover would retire after the fight, where the Brazilian fans left the arena and missed a legend of Brazilian MMA's farewell. A really fun card from top to bottom. It was just a shame the title bouts went the way they did, with the doctor stoppage and the Brazilian fans abandoning their legend. Number 5, UFC 284. The UFC had two pay-per-views in Australia in 2023. The previously mentioned UFC 293, which was good, but it was the first trip there which was just better, and delivered one of the better pay-per-views of the year. UFC 284 had one of the biggest super fights in MMA history, and at the time it may have not felt like it, but in the future we will look back on this fight and remember how special it was. UFC 284 had Islam Makhachev defending his lightweight title against Alexander Volkanovski, where Volk was going up in the hunt to become champ. And what made it better at the time, it was Islam pound for pound number 2 versus Volk, who was pound for pound number 1. This was on top of an amazing card of fights. The prelims had fights full of some brilliant hometown talent, putting on some great fights, with notable wins from Elves Brenner beating Zubaira Tukagov, and finishes from Loma Lukbume, Josh Kulibau and Clydeson Rodriguez. The main card is where this pay-per-view delivered, and what gets it such a high spot. Jimmy Crute and Alonzo Menefield battered each other in a competitive fight, which was a draw. Justin Taffa KO'd Parker Porter, Jack Della Maddalena put on a show finishing Randy Brown, and Yair Rodriguez put on a clinic and brilliant performance against Josh Emmett, securing the submission win. The main event had one of the fights of the year, with Islam Makhachev and Alexander Volkanovski putting on a high-level display of MMA in a back-and-forth fight of the year contender, which fans were debating the result of for weeks. This was on top of an electric Australia crowd for the amazing main card and moments. Easily, this is one of the best cards of the year. Number 4, UFC 285. The GOAT is back. Jon Jones made his long-anticipated return to the UFC octagon and would be returning and fighting for the vacant heavyweight title after Francis Ngannou's release. He would be fighting for vacant gold versus Cyril Gane. In a bout we would see if Jones could be a true heavyweight. The hype around this bout and Jones' return was massive and led to a bout with one of the best performances of the year, where Jones took down Cyril and secured the guillotine without really breaking a sweat. To finally see Jon Jones become a champion in 2 weight classes was an amazing moment. This was alongside a co-main event which had Alexa Grasso putting on an amazing upset, dethroning the long-reigning Valentina Shevchenko in one of the moments of the year. The rest of the main card also delivered, with Shavkat Rakhmonov and Jeff Neal putting on one of the fights of the year, with Shavkat securing the 3rd round submission win. Mateus Gamrot and Jalen Turner had a competitive bout, and Bo Nickel got another win and finish. This was alongside with prelims which had Cody Garbrandt getting back in the win column, Dricus du Plessis getting a brilliant finish over Derek Brunson, and Marc-Andre Barrier securing a KO, and even Ian Gary and Tabitha Ritchie getting great finishes on the early prelims, with great moments from top to bottom, and to end with that emphatic victory by Jon Jones earns it a high spot on the list. Number 3, UFC 295. The annual MSG card, and if you saw the rankings we had for the 2022, the MSG card won card of the year, and normally most years is an amazing card. This card was originally scheduled to have a super fight with Jon Jones defending his heavyweight title versus Stipe Miocic. However, Jones would get injured in training, which saw the bout get scrapped. Instead, the UFC bumped the co-main event to the main event and made a new bout with Tom Aspinall versus Sergey Pavlovich for the interim heavyweight title. The prelims had some fun fights and moments, with quick finishes from Jamal Emmers and Jared Gordon, securing a great KO after a tough streak. Nazim Sadikov and Vyacheslav Borushev had an amazing back and forth, and even Mateusz Rombeszki submitted Roosevelt Roberts. The main card was one of the best of the year, with 5 KO finishes. It started with Diego Lopez taking out Pat Sabatini, then Benoit Saint Denis destroyed Matt Frivola, and Jessica Andrade battered Mackenzie Dern, which was followed by an amazing KO from Tom Aspinall over Sergey Pavlovich, and was capped off by Alex Pereira beating and finishing Yuri Jiri Prochazka. A great card from top to bottom, but to see Pereira make a career comeback and become a 2-division champion was unreal. Seeing Aspinall become interim champ on short notice is insane, and all of the rest of the moments were brilliant. MSG delivered brilliance once again. Number 2, UFC 291. The UFC returned to Salt Lake City after last year Leon Edwards put on the KO of the year and one of the best moments of 2022. This time Salt Lake City was stacked full of fun fights, but the top of the card was a rematch of a fan favourite fight from 2018. Justin Gaethje would face Dustin Poirier for the BMF title on top of a stacked card. This pay-per-view had 11 fights, of which 9 fights had finishes, which shows how much this pay-per-view delivered. Miranda Maverick started the card with a submission win, followed by Uros Medic getting a TKO. This was followed by a submission win by Jake Matthews and then a brutal head kick by Roman Kopylov. Then a decision win in the next bout for CJ Vargas and then a brilliant submission win for Gabriel Bonfim. Kevin Holland put on a fun bout to start the main card, submitting Michael Chiesa. Bobby Green beat up a well past his prime Tony Ferguson in a bit of a sad bout, but he got the submission win. Derek Lewis channeled his inner Jorge Masvidal, starting the fight with a flying knee and getting the brilliant TKO finish. The co-main event was a bit of a dud between Alex Pereira, who was coming off his KO loss to Izzy, and Jan Blachowicz, where they had a cagey fight with Alex getting the decision win. The main event replayed history in Salt Lake City, with Justin Gaethje scoring a head kick to flatline Poirier in one of the moments of the year and one of the KOs of the year to end an amazing night of fights. Yes, we didn't really get an all-out war on the card, but 9 out of 11 finishes with amazing moments and action throughout deserves this pay-per-view a well-deserved silver medal. Number 1, UFC 290. That's right, the best pay-per-view of the year, International Fight Week, after all these years delivered the best pay-per-view of the year, and genuinely I believe one of the best pay-per-views in recent memory. A card stacked from top to bottom with amazing talent and fights, with an amazing prelims and main card. The prelims had standout moments, with Jesus Aguilar securing a 17-second KO. Then Cameron Simon finished Terence Mitchell and Vitor Petrino scored a submission win. Alonzo Menefield and Jimmy Crude had a back and forth in their rematch from UFC 284, where Menefield scored the submission win. Denise Gomes got a 20-second KO, Tatsu Taira got a win to keep his unbeaten streak going, and Robbie Lawler KO'd Nico Price and is one of the rare legends who retired on a win and had an amazing post-fight moment with the UFC commemorating his career. The main card was brilliant, with Bo Nickel scoring a KO to stay an undefeated prospect, and Dan Hooker and Jalen Turner put on a war and an amazing fight where Hooker made a great comeback in the fight. Dricus du Plessis scored one of the best upsets of the year, finishing Robert Whittaker and KOing him, and had a post-fight moment with Izzy. Alexander Pantoja and Brandon Moreno put on a 5-round war and one of the best flyweight title fights of all time, where Pantoja dethroned Moreno to become champion, and seeing him crowned was a great moment. And Alex Volkanovski put on a clinic defending his title in brilliant fashion to show he is the greatest featherweight in the world. Epic fights and wars, amazing finishes and performances, a 17-second KO, a legendary retirement, one of the best upsets in the UFC calendar year. UFC 290 had so much action and entertainment and delivered all night, which is why it rightfully earns the number 1 spot as the best pay-per-view of 2023. Did you enjoy our video? Let us know down in the comments below. How would you rank the pay-per-views of 2023? Put your rankings in the comments below. And what do you think was the best pay-per-view of 2023? Put that down in the comments below. Leave a like if you've enjoyed the video and subscribe for more MMA and fight content coming soon. We hope you enjoyed the video and we'll catch you in the next one.